Welcome everyone to the game between Hans Niemann and Ding Liren at the World Rapid Team Championship 2024. This is the top board clash between the two teams here that are playing gmhans.com versus Decade Chess Team China. And here a6 has just been played by Hans. Takes, knight takes. We've gotten this position out of the Catalan. Let's quickly look at the opening moves. It happened this way. This is the closed Catalan position, and then d takes c4 leads to open Catalan, and Hans has sacrificed a pawn here. Knight e4 played here, attacking the queen. So what black is essentially saying to Ding is that I have full compensation for the missing pawn in the form of my active pieces. c5 played, and now bishop comes out to e3. Hans plays his knight to b4, attacking the c2 square, trying to fork. Rook takes, queen takes, and Ding goes knight c3. And now look at Hans there taking the knight. Bit confused there, but actually it's the right decision. He takes, b takes, and now knight c2. Queen comes to d2. He chops off the bishop. Queen takes. In a way, you can say that this is a risk-free advantage for white, pawn up. But on the other hand, you can also say that black has enough compensation to hold the balance here. Queen comes to f4. Maybe the knight wants to jump to e5, attacking f7, but you have to be careful on the long diagonal. Bishop f6 played, and now e3 here. Maybe queen b8, offering a queen trade, is not such a silly move. He goes h6. Hans has to be careful not to let white stabilize himself. h4, and he plays his rook to c8. Now this allows actually knight e1 to trade off the bishops, and Ding finds it. This is a very important move. You can't move your bishop away because the queen is hanging. And now rook e8 is played. So in a way you can see that the last two moves were not that accurate and has given the advantage to Ding. Queen takes d5. Now he's a clean pawn up, and queen comes to f3, offering a trade. Now the problem is, if you take, knight takes, e5 is difficult to execute, because if you play e5, take, and maybe rook c1, and white still presses quite a bit. So goes queen c4. Ding comes up, queen e4 here, and maybe e5 is what he can play, but rook c8 and knight comes to d3, once again stopping e5. It feels like Hans is not dealing with this position in the right way. Queen to b5, and now rook a1. Pawn to g6 has been played. Slowly and steadily white's position getting more and more dangerous. King g2. The queen goes back to d7, and pawn push to h5. He goes g5 here, and rook to b1. So the knight can now jump to c5, the rook can jump to b7. Hans offers a trade of queens, and actually Ding can take it now, of course. He takes the queen, rook takes c6, and rook comes to b7. Hans Niemann pushes his rook to c2, and knight to c5. Now all that white has to do is slowly make progress here. He has too many trumps. First of all, an extra pawn. Second of all, a weakness on h6. He goes pawn to g4, and rook to a2. He brings his king up. rook to c2, and maybe some checks here, but then you don't want to trade off the knight for the bishop. The knight is too strong, so he goes knight d3. Rook d2 played, and maybe Ding's idea is king e4, pawn to f3. Just wait. Oh, he goes rook b3. The bishop comes back, and now king comes up to e4. So slowly and steadily he's moving upwards. King g7. Hans, simple question to Ding is, how are you going to make progress? He plays his bishop to d6 now. And the knight jumps to e5. Well, here taking is not a good idea, because after king takes e5, you have e4 and d5, and there is no way that black can hold that. So rook f2 played, and now the knight jumps back to d3. And the rook comes back. Rook c3. Ding is also enjoying himself here, but at the right time he needs to find a way to make progress. Now Hans has put his rook on e2, which means that there is some pressure on the e3 pawn. If the bishop can somehow find its way like this, goes rook f2. The waiting game continues. Knight c4 attacking the bishop. Bishop maybe has to go to g3. It's a good active square, and he plays his bishop to g3. And now Ding brings his rook to b3 square. Hans moves rook to c2. Knight comes to e5. And Hans stops the clock. Ding is surprised. What exactly is happening? Why has he stopped the clock? It seems like Hans Niemann wants to claim threefold repetition. But he says, I'm going to play my rook to f2 and I'm going to claim a draw. And Ding is like, well, maybe this position hasn't occurred 3 times for sure. So he's surprised there. The clock is restarted. Plays his rook to f2. There's no threefold repetition. Now knight to c6. So Ding has actually maybe found a way to make progress here, because if d5 is played at the right moment, he goes rook c2, then, and he does it, d5. Now the point is, after ed, king d5, the knight can find its way to the f5 square, which is an important development that's happened. Hans Niemann brings his king to f6. And the rook moves into b6. Bishop f2 attacking the e3 pawn. It takes on e6. Rook c3. And he takes. This is a big mistake. He can just play e7, rook here, king d5, and it was completely winning here for white. But instead he took rook e3, king d5 and king f7, and now once again black is back in the battle. Rook moves to a6. It's still a winning advantage to white, but Some work has to be done all over again. King d5, check. King c4. So Hans just doesn't give up. This is one of his biggest traits. He never gives up, keeps fighting until the bitter end. Rook d1, knight e5 check, king g7, and now Ding goes for a check, king moves. So everything's working fine for Ding right now. He's going to go after the pawn, knight f7, h6 pawn is hanging, but Hans is going to go after the f3 pawn with check and rook f4. Gives a check, king moves up to b5, and he makes knight f4. Ding takes the pawn, Hans takes the pawn as well. So 2 versus 1 now. And he goes knight to f5. Bishop h4 is a big mistake. He should have just moved his rook or a bishop here, and then after rook g5, bishop d2, and tried to hold on to that, because now after check, king h8, this is losing. h6 first of all, very important move, check, and now very critical to go king c6, not king c5, because there you're going to lose the pawn. You don't want to be allowing rook b6 happening. King c5, a blunder, check. Now Hans is back in the game. Unbelievable turnaround here. Unbelievable, because now king d5, you go check first. Very important to give a check. Not rook b6 directly because of knight d6. But rook check, he's played it. King e6 and now rook b6 check. Hans, and if knight d6, there is bishop c5. So complete. Oh, what? Hans resigns in a drawn position. Unbelievable.